Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by Bet365 Sportsbook and TheLines.com. I'm Eli Hershkovich, joined by Brett Gibbons at Road to CFB on X College Football, betting contributor with me over at TheLines.com. Also joined this week by Kevin Noon. You can follow him on X at Kevin_Noon of the Buckeye Huddle. Almost 25 years on the Ohio State football beat. Also a part of Wager Wire, and I believe also does some Ohio State basketball insight at Buckeye Huddle as well. Big college football or college basketball analyst. That's where my forte is at, but Kevin does both. So how we doing, Brett? Start with you first. Known college football traveler, as it says in your handle.
Yes, known college football traveler, I suppose. I'm doing great. Really excited to hit the road this week and, of course, talk about a few games on this weekend slate.
What about you, Kevin?
I'm excited to be here. I mean, this is not necessarily the greatest slate of games that we're going to see this year, but I think we're going to see a little bit of separation in terms of where some of the conference races are, and set us up for Hate Week the following week.
Yeah, lots of things going on Thanksgiving weekend, but let's kick it off, guys, with a top 5 matchup, at least according to the college football rankings. Number 5, Indiana. At number 2, Ohio State. Lots of different directions to go from here. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, you'll see Ohio State up from 11.5, minus 11.5 at home over at Bet365. Now 13.5 point favorites, so closing in on set flat minus 14 against IU. The Buckeyes favored to win the college football playoff over at Bet365 as well at plus 320. Joey Galloway will not be joining us on the show, guys. Ohio State alum discussing why Curtis Rourke shouldn't be playing in this game. But Ohio State averaging the 7th most adjusted line yards across college football up against a pretty stout Indiana defensive front, allowing the 5th fewest second-level yards, and they're also ranked 7th in stuff rate. So a matchup in the trenches for sure to watch for. Also key injury note that I'm sure Kevin will touch on as he covers the Buckeyes. Seth McLaughlin announced out for this game as of Tuesday, tearing his ACL, the Ohio State center. So that definitely pertaining to the Ohio State offensive line going up against a formidable Indiana defensive front. Indiana, though, Brett, I'm assuming you'll have some takes on this. Strength of schedule ranked 106th across college football, and the market agrees with the notion that it's going to be tough for them to upset the Buckeyes, not only when you look at the money line odds, but also 10-1 to get the number 1 seed in the college football playoff over at Bet365. So anywhere you want to go here, any bets, any overall thoughts on Ohio State, Indiana?
Well, you started where the conversation needs to start, and that's up front. It's more than just Seth McLaughlin. That's just the latest blow to this Ohio State front. We got Donovan Jackson, All-American guard. He's over at left tackle. By all intents and purposes, and Kevin, I'm sure you'll give your 2 cents here too. I thought he looks pretty good. He got his lunch money taken a couple of times by Abdul Carter, but seasoned left tackles in college football are getting their lunch money taken by Abdul Carter every now and then. But they looked really good against Penn State. Now losing McLaughlin though, that's tough. You lose your center, the kind of the captain in the middle there. We have Carson Hinsman, I believe I saw is the guy sliding over to replace him. He did start 12 games at center last year, graded kind of poorly at PFF or whatever that's worth. So we're kind of plugging in backups across the way. We're already down, backup. We are a second left guard in there. Josh Fryer, right tackle, is the only preseason starter still in his spot. And they're going up against Indiana, not to look too far ahead, but also Michigan's defensive line. They're really, really going to be tested. I thought they looked okay against Penn State. Really, they're being thrown in the deep end and told to swim here against Indiana, of course, because you're talking about the top name over there, Mikael Kamara, just an absolute monster. 53 pressures this year and 9 sacks at the defensive end position. That offensive line did hold their ground in the ground game. I think Ohio State may be able to run it, but I don't know, man. I think Indiana might actually be a step up in class from Penn State, which is, boy, imagine those words coming out of anybody's mouth in July. They're aggressive, they're nasty, and they're playing with their hair on fire right now. They're playing with something to prove. And this game, walking into the shoe, as the Indiana Hoosiers, they have a lot to prove here. Curtis Rourke, of course, is a beast back there. You talked about their strength of schedule, 106th. Let's get one thing straight here. You play who you play in front of you. They did cancel a game against Louisville a while ago. These games were scheduled years ago. but they're not a fraudulent team. You know, they blew out Nebraska. I know Nebraska, 56-7. That's their biggest loss of the year by far. They cruised past Washington when Rourke didn't even play. And they're balanced, man. They're third total in offensive EPA, seventh in the rush game, and second in the throw game, fourth overall in points per drive. So look, if you're looking to back Indiana in this, you may want to take a different route and actually take Curtis Rourke for Heisman. I know Travis Hunter's probably got it locked up. Rourke's probably not going to be getting a lot of votes there, but if you can find a cash-out friendly book at least, you can take 30-1 right now. If Indiana wins, that's going way, way down. Maybe you can get away with a profit on that. Indiana, look, they're going to be able to throw in this Ohio State secondary, talented though they are. They struggle in man-to-man, and Indiana, boy, let me tell you, they got way better receivers than Penn State, and I know Penn State didn't score a lot of points. That was a little bit worrisome, being able to throw on this secondary here. Of course, we saw how Oregon did that. I think this is probably the best receiving core that Ohio State's seen this year other than Oregon, and we saw how that went.
Fair enough. And Kevin, I want to swing it to you, but going back to your point about Curtis Rourke, 28-1 to win the Heisman, the fifth shortest odds, but obviously a step up in weight class beyond Travis Hunter, the odds-on favorite, Genty of Boise State, and then Cam Ward of Miami. But his Heisman odds took a dent and rose up a little bit, more than a little bit, after Miami got upset by Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago. I get your point about strength of schedule, but you go back to that Washington game, for instance. Pick six on the first possession. And granted, I had the Huskies in that game, so maybe I'm a little bit still salty with that result because I thought it was a good spot to fade the Hoosiers after the Huskies were coming off the bye week. But Kevin, your perspective on this game. Indiana, their resume coming in, obvious step up in weight class, but with all the injuries, especially up front with Ohio State, to Brett's point, can Indiana challenge Ohio State a little bit more offensively than what we saw Penn State do? Nittany Lions struggled in the red zone in that game.
Yeah, well, the Nittany Lion offense struggled altogether, only putting up 6 points. Remember, there was the pick six that was the other 7 points of the 13 points that Penn State had. So Ohio State did a good job there. But to Brett's point, to everybody's point, it starts with the line. And this is really offensive line 4.0 for them because they lost Josh Simmons at Autzen against Oregon. They bring in Zen Mahalski. That doesn't work out. He ends up getting hurt. So then they go to the current configuration or the previous configuration of the line, and now you lose McLaughlin. So you're kicking Carson Hinsman into center, bringing in Austin Sareveld as your offensive guard. So how is that going to hold? I'm a big proponent of looking at not only at stats, but where the stats occurred. And so much of Indiana's pass rushing prowess happened in 2 Big Ten games. They gave up, it was Maryland and Michigan State. And between the two of them, 12 sacks occurred in those 2 games. Everything else has been 2 and 3 in the conference play. I'm not really concerned about non-conference, including the Western Illinois game and FCS game. I really gray those stats out because I don't care. Michigan's line, which is not the greatest line in the world, held these guys to 0 sacks. Now, I will be the first one to admit that Ohio State is once again breaking in a new line, and you're not going to be able to expect everything to work out perfectly. But I mean, Ohio State doesn't necessarily have to pitch a shutout in that front to be able to find some success. But what I think this does do is takes down some of the more complex routes. You're not going to be able to be doing double moves and things because I think the clock is going to be sped up with all of that. Ohio State should be getting tight end Will Kacmarek, the transfer from Ohio University, back. I think that's big in terms of their blocking tight end. I think they're going to run a lot of 12 personnel with him and G. Scott in as your tights. So you look at what Indiana has done this year against who it's gone against. And yeah, it has beat everybody but Michigan by 14 plus points. And that is impressive. It's hard to do that against your twos, let alone an opposing team. But this is, for Curtis Rourke, this is going to be by far the biggest game he's ever come into, the former Ohio University quarterback, not playing in the cathedrals of college football in the MAC. Then you look at where they played so far this year. At UCLA, where there are more tarps than fans, Northwestern, which is a converted soccer practice facility, and then Michigan State, which has already packed it in by this point of the season. So, I think that there are all the things, and I'm hearing some of the names coming out. Rick Neuheisel saying that Ohio State could be in trouble, some of these others, but, I don't see it. I've already made my score prediction. I don't think I put it out there yet. I think I overcorrected from the Seth McLaughlin injury. And I think I took the line down too far. And now I'm kind of regretting it. I kind of want to get in and change it. But, once you make it, you're stuck. So, Ohio State is still a favorite for a reason. This game is in Columbus. Ohio State has owned the series since 1990. I mean, you're looking at a tie in 90. I think that Indiana's last wins came in 87 and 88. What does that have to do with this year? Nothing, but it's still something worth talking about here on the shows.
Right. And you look at turnover margin, Indiana ranking top 20, and this is a point that I like to make to wrap up the conversation, Brett, a lot. And I know in your articles from time to time in college football, you take a look at variance, especially when it comes to preseason and maybe some underlooked, undervalued conference title odds. When Indiana doesn't get that early break or havoc-driven play, maybe we don't want to call it a break. The one time we saw the Hoosiers deal with any sort of adversity was when they were down 10-zip at Michigan State. But to Kevin's point, maybe Michigan State was a little more locked in at that point. Hoosiers blow them out the rest of the way. What happens in this game if Indiana gets down 10-zip?
If that's going to happen, it's going to happen in the second quarter on, because Ohio State's gotten off to a lot of slow starts this year. I mean, we saw it against when they went down real quick against Penn State, and you almost thought, oh boy, what the heck is going to go on here? Eli, they had a slow start against Akron, man. I mean, it's been the name of the game this year. They have to have a better first quarter against Indiana. They can't be plotting this 0-0, 3-0, not converting in the red zone or whatever it might be, turning the ball over early, because that's going to give Indiana the door. It's going to crack the door open, and as we've seen Curt Cignetti do not just at Indiana but his whole career, you leave that door cracked for him, he's going to bust it in. I'm not saying that Ohio State's in trouble by any stretch here, but I don't see that early down 14-0 after two possessions for Indiana and see how they respond after that. It could be a 10-0 halftime deal there rather than early on in the game.
Fair enough. And Kevin, just based off of your outlook on the game, it seems like maybe you think Ohio State, conversely to Brett's point, can get off to a hot start?
Well, here's the thing, and obviously my play in this game would be Indiana, first half spread, I think is where I would look at this game.
Okay.
But, Ohio State has faced a lot of teams that are trying to take the air out of the ball right off the bus. 2 possessions in the first half, 3 possessions in the first half. That's not what Indiana does. Indiana has had the open week to try and, maybe work on some things, but your successful teams are not the ones that reinvent themselves every single week to try and fit right into the keyhole against who it is that they're going against. You find things that you do well and you go and do them. So I think we're going to see Indiana run more offense, which means that I think Ohio State has the opportunity for more offensive plays. But you better get the Buckeyes in a decent position before you get to half, because Ohio State has outscored teams something along the lines of like 121 points to 9 in the third quarter. It's kind of outrageous. But I don't think that Ohio State's necessarily going to get off to a slow start. But what I am concerned about is that Ohio State will be kind of looking and feeling with its new offensive line. And if you're running a bunch of inside zone and you're at 3rd and 8, and then you're having to sit there on an obvious throwdown, and you've got the pass rush coming at you. If Ohio State has a couple of empty series to start things off, I mean, we're back at square one. So, I think Ohio State has to be mindful of it, paint the edges, do some things along those lines, but certainly applying that pressure right out of the gate of getting up and, scoring on 2 of your first 3 possessions, 3 of your first 3 possessions would certainly go a long ways to making this a game for that only last 2 quarters versus 4.
First half line for this game, by the way, over at Bet365, Ohio State -7, total of 26.5. Maybe we do see some points early on, but to Kevin's point, depends on how Ohio State's offensive line plays with dealing with a couple key notable pieces, including, or most notably, McLaughlin and the adjustment there. By the way, I wanted to also note as we record across the board, including at Bet365, the tough situation with recording during a couple days in advance of a game. Sometimes we do see the market adjust within a matter of a couple hours. And we're recording this here on Thursday, November 21st. Buckeyes down from now close to 14-point home favorites to 12-point favorites. Still a total of 51.5. So some money has come in on Indiana literally as we record this podcast. So maybe anybody was somehow got in the back end of Riverside here as we record and taking a look at Brett's take on the game. We'll see. Either way, Kevin, want to swing it to you with some SEC action. Kentucky at number 3, Texas. Speaking of fraudulent resumes, I don't want to throw Texas in the camp of Indiana, but it's worth maybe a marginal conversation. Longhorns are tied with Georgia, though, for the third best odds to win the college football playoff at Bet365 at plus 500. Nearly a 3-touchdown favorite against Kentucky. Total of 47 in that game. Thank the heavens, Quinn Ewers struggled against Arkansas last week in the first half, for me at least. I want to say a 13.5 point favorite, but just 4.3 yards per pass attempt against a banged up Hogs defense that was essentially holding tryouts leading up to the game against the Longhorns. But Ewers has been inconsistent. We saw it last week against a middle tier to lower end SEC opponent, granted a good home spot for the Hogs. Kentucky's defense ranks 33rd across college football in net points allowed per drive, and we saw it with Arkansas's number 1 tailback last week. Jaquindon Jackson had a big second half, which allowed Arkansas to cover the number, and Kentucky ranks 20th in rushing success rate offensively, and that's the most notable vulnerable aspect of this Longhorns defense that is pretty stiff against the pass. So can Texas get Kentucky into those third and longs like we saw were an issue for Arkansas in the first half? A little bit of the polar opposite in the second half when Jackson got going on the ground here. Also keep in mind, could be a look-ahead spot for Texas with A&M on deck next week. So, Kevin, do you see this going similarly to the narrative, potentially, even though it's at Texas, a little bit of a sleepy spot for the Longhorns against a Kentucky team that can potentially take advantage of Texas's defense on the ground?
Yeah, there are so many things in play on this one. I mean, first and foremost, I do agree that Texas is going to be looking ahead to Texas A&M. You sit there and you see Kentucky on the front of the jerseys. You look at a team that has been pretty poor since the upset of Ole Miss. I think it's really easy to be like, well, we can just kind of show up, roll out there, and get a 17-point win and be done with it. Kentucky has been monumentally bad since the Ole Miss win. Outside of an out-of-conference win against, who knows? I mean, Murray State, Mercer, it's all the same damn team to me at that point. But I think they just one team that just travels around more than Brett from game to game, just a journeyman of going from we're just going to go collect our checks. But there's only been one game in the history of this series, a 7-6 win for Texas in 1951. I was kind of surprised. I mean, obviously Texas is a brand new member of the SEC, so there isn't that there. But you would think that these two teams would have played, but they haven't. I mean, I think that you look at the quarterback situation. A lot of people are still clamoring for the player they don't know, for Arch Manning. Bring in Arch Manning. Quinn Ewers has kind of hit a little bit of a ceiling at some points. Has not necessarily been super sharp. So at some point, does that noise start to really infiltrate the team? And everybody's like, well, when we're in our football facility, we're not listening to any of that outside noise. BS. We know better than that. I mean, you can be in there, sun up to sundown, but your people are still going to get to you, whether it's your girlfriend or your mom or somebody's going to say, can you believe what so and so said about you? I think that Texas is disciplined enough not to fall victim here, and I think Kentucky's not talented enough to take advantage of any real openings. I still can't explain the Kentucky Ole Miss game. Ole Miss is a team I've watched probably a little bit more than a lot of other teams out there. I just don't understand it. I think maybe somebody told Kiffin that Nick Saban was somehow associated there, and he tightened up or something. But outside of that, I don't know. I think that Texas will be able to move the ball well enough, and that Kentucky is just going to get stymied playing there at DKR. And I think that this one is just going to go as expected.
So you like Texas laying the nearly 3-touchdown spread?
I said something. We traded notes on Wednesday night, and I said one thing, and I've changed my mind on two of them since. Just to let the listeners know, I've really thought this through. My first appearance here on this show. I don't want to look like the idiot picker on game day that never gets invited back or whatever. I did say yesterday that I like Kentucky in the points, but I think I've changed my mind. I've talked myself into it. I think that Texas covers.
Okay, Brett, what about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with your second notion there, Kevin, in that I don't know what the heck happened in Kentucky. It's like they ran out of gas after that Georgia, Ohio, Ole Miss stretch where they took Georgia to the brink. I know Georgia didn't play well, especially on the road, but they beat Ole Miss. It's just they have 4 straight FBS losses. I don't care about Murray State. I don't care about that result whatsoever. They have not scored 21 points against a conference opponent this year. I know Texas doesn't have that marquee win, but they haven't really messed around with the inferior opponent. I know, they're subject to scrutiny just because they're Texas and who their quarterbacks are and all that, but they had that 10-point win against Arkansas. I think Arkansas is a little bit better than most realize, even though they're having the student section playing defense there. But they also had a 22-point win over Mississippi State earlier, which is, I think, the more comparable team and result that we may see here against Kentucky.
Over to Texas's former conference, the Big 12, looking at number 16 Colorado at Kansas. This game being played at Arrowhead Stadium, the Chiefs Stadium in Kansas City. So a little bit of a situational spot just by the notion that Kansas has home field, but I'm sure we'll see Buffs fans travel well in this game. Maybe, Brett, you'll make the trip over after you. Where are you headed again this weekend?
I won't spoil it. It's a game we're going to talk about here.
Oh, right.
Later on. Yeah.
Okay, so probably not. I blanked on where you're going. But I have a betting guide up for this game at thelines.com that I do know. And similar to Arkansas, Texas, obviously different degree of opponent A and team I'm fading B. So Colorado tied for the third best cover rate in the country. I have this all in my article, but Cliff Notes here, 8-2 against the spread, 80% hit rate, covering the point spread. And Travis Hunter, you have an article dictating this over at thelines.com, Brett. The odds-on favorite, far and away in that market to win the Heisman, the dual threat Hunter, leading the pack against Genty, along with Ward that we discussed earlier on. And still, I'm looking to fade the Buffs, selling high on Colorado. The Jayhawks, a little bit undervalued in the market despite covering their last 4 games. And with Colorado still on the outside looking in, but having that crack at making the college football playoff, a little bit of a crease there, along with the fact that they could, scenarios up in the air, but they could clinch a spot in the Big 12 championship game this weekend. So like I alluded to with Kansas, they're hot after starting 1-6 straight up. They have that upset win over BYU last weekend on the road. Jalen Daniels with the miracle pooch punt to set up Kansas in a goal-to-go situation. And Daniels tied, by the way, just to the point that I brought up with Kansas maybe being a little bit undervalued in the market still, despite covering a handful of games of late. 5th most passing yards lost to drop. So Kansas struggled early on offensively. Daniels maybe a little bit shaky coming off of the injury that kept him out all of last season. But Kansas starting to round into form offensively at a great time where there's still a little bit of value to me in the market with Kansas getting the 3 points at home, juiced albeit, but still Colorado -3, -105 as we record here on Thursday at Bet365. The Jayhawks, speaking of adjusted line yards, like I mentioned with Ohio State, 6th most adjusted line yards in college football. Colorado's defense much improved in that regard, but it's not a dominant defensive line. They rank 55th in stuff rate. And Kansas, if they get that ground game going with Daniels, dual threat quarterback, and Devin Neal, they rank outside the top 100 across college football in tempo. So you slow down the clock. It's not like you're getting a double-digit point spread, but you keep the pace in your favor, and that does generally favor the underdog. In Colorado, I get they have all the highlight reel plays this season, and rightfully so, with Sanders and Hunter. Sanders potentially being a top 5 pick at the quarterback position, but in the NFL draft, when I say that. But Colorado ranks outside of the top 40 in college football in EPA per play, success rate, and explosive play rate. So I kind of think Colorado is not only being overvalued overall, but in particular with their offense. This isn't a dominant offense despite the names may be making you believe it is. Kansas +3 -116 is a bet for me at Bet365. I got a little bit of a better number earlier in the week, and you can check out that bet in our Discord channel, the Lines Discord channel. It's free. The link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner. Brett, I know it's not a bet for you, but are you siding with me with the technically hometown Jayhawks? We'll see a better home crowd or road crowd for Colorado if this game was at Kansas. Maybe not so much, but what are you betting or what are you leaning toward here?
Oh, God, this is going to be clipped all over Twitter. I've been attacked so many times this year by Colorado fans because I was wrong about them, if they want to hear that. But let's be clear here. I mean, this isn't even the market needing to slightly adjust to Kansas. This isn't even the same football team since they went on their bye. They've won 3 of their last 4. They've covered all 4. They almost beat Kansas State for the first time in quite a while. And these aren't tomato cans they're playing. Houston, I know, not great, but they're actually an improved team. That's a better win than it may appear on paper. Kansas State, at Kansas State, I know they lost that game, but they played well. Iowa State, BYU. I mean, this is like the top of the conference that they've been playing. They beat 2 of those teams, and now they got Colorado. They come, quote-unquote, home here. I don't really think I'm giving a whole lot of home field advantage to Kansas because they got to travel, away from campus as well. And Arrowhead is in a major metro area that's very easy to fly to from Denver. We saw it with TCU. I mean, it's just like it's opposing fan takeover, which I get. But look, Jalen Daniels is also a different football player. First 5 games, 5 touchdowns, 8 picks. Last 5 games, 8 touchdowns, 2 picks. He's just taking care of the ball better. And the Jayhawks' strength on defense is their secondary. They have a very, very good secondary, a very good tandem of corners. In Colorado, they're not out to run the football. They're 132nd in rushing yards. I'm not a huge fan of the compiling stats, but when you're like 3rd to last in the country in rushing yards a game, that means you're not running the ball or not running it very well. It kind of plays into the defense here. And conversely, Kansas has ran the heck out of the ball. In 3 out of the last 4 games, they've rushed for 200 or more rushing yards. So I like it. I don't have it in my bank account. I am absolutely terrified about what this will do on social media. But, yeah, I do like the way that you're thinking there, Eli.
Good situational spot. Kevin, can we make it 3 for 3-ish with the Jayhawks?
Yeah, I have built a house on betting against Kansas or against Colorado. And by that I just mean I've shot a lot of bricks. It has not been a good situation. Obviously, Kansas is a different team than what we saw earlier in the season, coming off of the big win against BYU and everything else that's going there. Daniels is a very different quarterback than what we saw to start the season. I just don't know if Colorado has enough self-awareness to know that it is, in the top of the mountain right now, vying for the Big 12 championship game, everything else, if it's going to get tight there. But I do think that Kansas can just beat them outright. I don't think it's even going to be a matter of Colorado having to mess anything up or have, -2 turnover margin or whatever. I think Kansas is going to be able to do it. And this is very different feeling than I had 10 days ago about Kansas going into that BYU game. And I'm like going on social media. It's like, why the heck is, the line only 3 points? Well, I guess I'm a Kansas believer. Rock chalk. They're going to win.
All right. Make
We're
it a
in
3
trouble.
for 3.
We are so in trouble. Colorado's going to win this game going away, and we're going to never hear the end of it.
Well, this is, and I hate to use the cliche pros versus Joes, but we've seen this number flex all around the key number of a field goal. And I know key numbers in college football in terms of a touchdown, so a 7-point spread, and a field goal spread, so a 3-point spread, a little bit different than it is in the NFL just because of the range of outcomes. In college football, you're more likely to get a blowout in a shorter spread or just in general versus in the NFL. Key numbers are a little more critical, but still, at the key number 3, Colorado opened this line opened Colorado -3, then dipped down quickly. Sharps came in on Kansas, so Colorado down on Monday to 2.5. Then sharp money came in on the flip side on the short road, quote-unquote road to Brett's point, favorite back to Kansas +3. And I actually grabbed Kansas +3 -105. I'm all over that. Again, I know it's a little bit of not necessarily the same degree when you're talking about good college basketball spots, but this is the kind of point in the season in general in collegiate sports when I want to fade a ranked team, especially when the metrics align with that. So For better or worse, I'm on Kansas here. I grabbed that decent size bet for me at Kansas +3 -105. But over to Kevin's official bet, unless you want to swing me for a loop here, third time's the charm, with Notre Dame, number 6 Notre Dame in the college football rankings against Army at Yankee Stadium. The Irish are over 2 touchdown favorites on the point spread, total of 44.5 in this game. Riley, Leonard, and the Irish tied with Penn State for the 7th best odds to win the college football playoff at Bet365 at 20-1. And Jeff Monken's offense on the flip side for Army, top-ranked rushing success rate in college football. So is this a situation, Kevin, literally that we see a service academy team have success on the ground, dictate the pace, and cover paced by Bryson Daly and this service academy-driven rushing attack, whether it's Army, Navy, or Air Force, you get the deal. Are you taking the dog here with Army?
It's interesting with this game being at Yankee Stadium, and whenever you have a game at a non-traditional football venue, I mean, how's the surface going to be, especially getting here into later November? I mean, obviously we're talking about a game up in the Northeast. I mean, is it going to be snow and ice? I mean, does it have a decent drainage system? What's going to be the case there? Looking at Army and how Army's had some drives, Army had a 13-plus minute drive this season, which was just obscene for most people. I found it very, quite fascinating, but I mean, very obscene there. This is a game where it feels like everything is begging you to take the under, which leads me to take the over. I like the over in this game more than anything. And it's like, if you've got an Army team that's going to have to try and, drag it out and not let Notre Dame get out there and have possessions, I just think we're going to see the opposite happen. I think we're going to see Army get out there and use some of its underreported passing game. I think Notre Dame is going to get out there and is going to be able to find some holes in the zones and things along those lines. And I think that we're going to have ourselves an old-fashioned shootout in this game. Now, I don't have enough faith in Army to win the game, as the underdog. I think Notre Dame, again, is another program that sees everything out there, despite its horrible MAC loss to Northern Illinois. I think that Notre Dame takes care of it, but I think that because Notre Dame is taking care of it, Army is having to be in tow, and I think that we see something over the 44.5.
Brett, any play for you on the total?
No play on the total, but I like where your head's at, especially because if Notre Dame runs away with this game, much in the way that they did against Navy, and I know Army's a better team than Navy by a little bit, then the Irish are going to be coming pretty close to covering this number themselves. And I do like taking overs in games in which one of the teams can cover the figure by themselves. Huge step up in class compared to the rest of Army's schedule. You look at what Notre Dame's been doing to teams since NIU. Well, really since the second half of the Miami-Ohio game, because they got off to a slow start there. But I don't know, man. This Notre Dame team is playing a lot better than in years past. Their passing attack is the question. I don't think this is going to be the game where they're going to need to have that step up. And I think the fact that it's now settled at 14.5 is just begging people to take Army with that hook on 14. And I think Notre Dame is going to run away with this. I mean, they opened it, I think, 10.5 or something and climbed from there. So I think Notre Dame runs away with it. But I do like the overplay on that, because this could be it was 51-14 against Navy. This could be a 48-14 or 48-21 game against Army. So yeah, I like where you're at, Kevin.
Before we get over to some of the a few other games here to wrap up, beat the closing number, Brett, I wanted to ask you, if you look at national championship odds over at Bet365, Ohio State +320, Oregon +450, Texas 5-1. I mentioned those earlier. Texas tied with Georgia, Bama 8-1, Ole Miss, a team I really like, on both sides of the ball at 10-1. They were 30-1, I believe, before they upset Georgia, depending on the closing number. I think they pretty much closed as a dog at home a few weeks ago. Penn State and Notre Dame, both at 20-1. If you had to make a bet right now, Indiana also, maybe despite my negativity, 25-1. Which team would you take among those odds within the market?
Well, I'm sitting on a 26-1 preseason ticket on Ole Miss, so Ole Miss, but it's tough because there's no seriously complete team. There's always complete team asterisks this year. Ohio State, offensive line is banged up. That's a problem. Oregon's really the only team right now that I don't have a whole lot of questions about, but do I see them winning the whole thing? No, I don't think so. I think I'd probably have to go the Buckeyes just because I'm not betting on Georgia away from Athens. Heck no chance. They could. I don't care who they're playing in the first round. If it's a road game, I'm going to bet against them. Texas has flaws. Ohio State, I guess.
I'm kind of surprised to see the market respect Texas like it has. Just juxtaposed, I know Indiana's strength of schedule is way worse, but like we've all touched on, Quinn Ewers, not necessarily a trustworthy quarterback. I don't want to necessarily put him in the camp of Carson Beck, but that Arkansas game showed his true colors in a game that he could have iced the game in the first half, really. And sleepy spot on the road, early kickoff, I get it. But I'm in the camp with you. At the very least, if you want to boot a team out, Texas 5-1, I don't want to say crazy, but definitely not a number I'm looking to bet. Kevin, anything stand out to you, whether it's teams that you're looking to fade or a number that you like?
Yeah, I'm not sold on Oregon being able to compete on the national stage. I mean, Oregon beats Ohio State 32-31. Ohio State on a questionable OPI call. I mean, it is what it is. They haven't had Tez Johnson here for a while. I mean, that is a key piece there. I don't know if their running game is going to be able to translate well going against the national stage, being away from Autzen, whether or not it's on fast tracks on indoor facilities or just, finely manicured southern stadiums and what have you. I like the Ole Miss bet. I mean, I'd like it a lot better at 26-1, like Brett has. But I like that one. Yeah, I'm not a believer in Texas at all. I'm not a believer in Texas at all at 5-1. I think that they are the type of team that could sit there and get themselves Boise Stated or something along those lines. I mean, in very different circumstances in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma, when Oklahoma had no interest in being there. If you can't get up for a college football playoff game, then what the heck's wrong with you? But yeah, I think that Texas is kind of has dipped its toe in the fire one too many times. It's bound to get burned.
Yeah, and to Kevin's point, everything is circumstantial when it comes to the odds. Texas's path to advance further along in the college football playoff technically better than others. So from that standpoint, I understand that the market is basing it off of that in terms of the current college football playoff bracket. But yeah, Ole Miss, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, set up to play Indiana. That game would be at Bloomington, and Indiana, a 4-point dog is the look-ahead line or theoretical look-ahead line for that game. No?
No. I'm just making a face at the fact that it's 4.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm saying. I could not imagine. I literally can't imagine the amount of bets that would come in on Indiana, and I'd be laying the 4 with Ole Miss.
Yeah. It's also the thing that we've never seen before that is absolutely worth noting is what is Bloomington, Indiana going to look like in mid-December? I mean, we're all located in the Midwest, and we're preparing for winter weather here, and it's the end of November. So, like, if it's a dicey conditions, can Ole Miss walk into snow? I'd have to see. I know it's a cop-out. I'd have to see the weather.
Fair enough. Not jumping on with me. I'll always take your Kansas acknowledgement earlier out of the show. But over to, this is what we're going to coin as the Bet365 Sicko Game of the Week. I knew you would like that. Take it a look at the second of 2 Service Academy picks here on the show, or games that involve Service Academy teams. Air Force at Nevada. The Wolfpack favored by over the key number of 3 at Bet365, 3.5-point home favorites. Total of 44.5. Nevada 3-8 straight up. Air Force 3-7, and both teams rank outside of the top 90 across Division I college football in EPA expected points added margin. Now, this segment unofficially sponsored by, since it is a sicko game, one of 2. Brett's last game here that he's going to discuss is the second. By the way, a little bit of foreshadowing there. Unofficially sponsored by the Subway footlong cookie sandwich that was just announced this week. Over 1,400 calories. I cannot imagine stomaching one of those things. I don't know if either of you two plan on it, but Brett, I think since you're betting on this game, you have to record yourself eating one of those games or eating one of those sandwiches, cookies, whatever you want to call it, and put it on TikTok.
Well, I'd have to create TikTok for it. If I lose this bet, I will consider it.
Okay.
I have a pretty good sweet tooth.
Fair enough. Okay, so what's your take on the point spread?
I'm taking the points with Air Force plus 3.5. Look, the market just hasn't adjusted to this being a new team that's winning games, that got a lot of guys back from injury, a lot of starters back, particularly on defense, starting linebackers, like all these guys are back, and they've looked a whole lot more competitive since. Now, I do have to look at the teams they played. They beat Fresno, which hung 36 on them. That, I think, was one of the more surprising results of that weekend. And then they beat Oregon State, who is, oh, good Lord, in a free fall. Terrible football team right now, 28-0. They blanked them. But look, they lost to Army 20-3. Everyone's losing to Army right now. 20-3 is not all that bad. The defense looks pretty good, even with Bryson Daly in the lineup for Army. And they nearly beat Colorado State, who, by the way, would play Boise State today in the Mountain West Championship game, if that were to end, 21-13. And if they were able to swing that game, they finished with Nevada and San Diego State. And I think we could be talking about, again, if they won that, let's be realistic. We might be talking about a 5-7 Air Force team. We see this happen, particularly with the service academies all the time. We saw it when Air Force just last year lost Zach Larrier, the quarterback. They free fell. And you see Army had a big turnaround. Like, there's these teams every year that have violent swings at the end of their year for good or for ill, and the market just never fully adjusts on them. And I think Air Force is a better football team right now than they've been. 68.7% of their total yards this season come from the rush. That's second most in the country. Of course it is. They're a service academy. Nevada's 130 against the rush. I like that matchup quite a bit right there. The weather is questionable. It was looking dicey earlier in the week with an atmospheric river over there in the Northwest. And if it is bad, that plays way more into Air Force's style than Nevada's. I don't think they're a bottom 15 team in the FBS anymore. So I'm taking Air Force here with the points.
Kevin, you going and swaying a little bit in the opposite direction, just in terms of Army and your position on that game. Do you think Air Force can keep this one tight?
Brett made some very convincing points. I had something jotted down here on my Word document, and it was like, take Nevada, and now I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, because everything he said there sounds good, but you know what? We also know who wins the office pool, and it's that secretary who doesn't watch football and just picks teams because of their favorite color or whatever. So we'll just take Nevada. I have no factual basis whatsoever. This was a game that I found out about 2 hours before recording that we were going to talk about, and like all the notes I have, I don't like.
Okay. Fair enough. So you're throwing it out the window and you're siding with Air Force. I enjoy the switcheroo there. Back to the Big Ten, looking at number 25, Illinois at Rutgers. Kevin, you have a bet on this game. The Fighting Illini favored by a single point at Bet365. Scarlet Knights minus 105 on the money line. Total of 47.5. The betting market has not respected Brett Bielema's team all season long, and rightfully so to an extent. We saw it a couple weeks ago in a two-game stretch, two-game sample size, Illinois failing to cover in blowout fashion at Oregon, and then I believe slight home underdogs to Minnesota, losing that game by nearly a touchdown, bounce back last week against Michigan State as short home favorites. But this matchup probably boils down to whether Altmaier can take advantage of a Rutgers secondary that is exploitable, or if Rutgers' rushing attack can exploit and maybe drain some clock, similar to my point about Kansas, Colorado, if they can do the same against Illinois and that rushing defense that has some holes. So, Kevin, which side are you going with here?
Normally when I think about Rutgers football, especially at home, I think about them playing good defense, and that hasn't necessarily been the case this year. It's funny, we ran into Greg Schiano and some of the Rutgers players that were in Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days, and we sat there and had a conversation with Greg, and because we knew him from his time at Ohio State, and he felt pretty good about his team, and I just haven't necessarily seen anything that we have discussed. Now for Illinois is coming a time zone away. It's going to be an 11 a.m. body clock kickoff for them at Rutgers. I mean, sometimes I take that into consideration. Sometimes I don't. I mean, heck, when I was an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, I was getting to bed at 4. So, I mean, I don't do body clock all that much. But I think Illinois has started to show me a couple of things, even if they haven't necessarily, cracked the walnut yet. I think that they have some of the right pieces. And I can't believe I'm saying that about a Luke Altmaier team, because I've not really been a huge believer in him. But I have had a couple of Rutgers bets that have blown up in my face this year. And because of that, I am not making that mistake again. You only fall for the banana in the tailpipe trick so many times. Give me Illinois -1.
Brett, you're going to be at this game, so we're paying off the tease, the one that I forgot. You'll be at this game at Rutgers. Are you going to be looking to bet the Illini like Kevin?
I don't really love either side here. And look, Illinois is a kind of under the radar team at 7-3. They had a nice bounce back win against Michigan State, like we talked about. Luke Altmaier has been great. I said like 3 years ago, I was really excited for this guy when he played in the Sugar Bowl. And then, of course, Jackson Dart went out, and he wasn't very good since then. But, hey, it's coming around. Better early than never, I suppose. Look, we've had just a bizarre stretch with this Rutgers defense, who are actually without some of their top players on defense. They gave up 42 to Wisconsin, which I couldn't have guessed that in 100 years. 35 to UCLA, 42 to USC. But then those guys get back, and they're a lot better defensively against Minnesota and Maryland. And when the defense is on, I know Washington flew cross country, held them to 18, held Nebraska to 14. Nothing great there, but Minnesota's been playing well. You held them under 20. You held Maryland, who's not that great, under 20. When this defense plays well, it plays well. And of course, this Illinois offense is a little bit better than what they've seen lately. But this seems square when I say it out loud, but 47.5, that's kind of a bunch of points for these teams that could end in a 17-10 deal here. And it's going to be pretty nice on Saturday. Fortunately, we're not dealing with driving rain or wind or anything like that, but it's going to be a little breezy. And I don't know. I don't really trust Calic Manis for Rutgers. Surely not. And Luke Altmaier has been really good this year at times, but he can also be kind of bad. So I think if I'm leaning to anything here, I'm probably taking under.
Okay. So I like that, especially if Rutgers is in a position where they're dictating the tempo, or if Altmaier struggles, to your point. The handicap definitely makes sense. But let's say you're Kevin, and you're betting on this game over at Bet365 Sportsbook. You're looking to maybe get out a little bit early if Illinois jumps ahead, and your demons kind of come back to haunt you, and Rutgers does come back late in this game to win the game outright. Well, with the Bet365 early payout offer, you're a winner if your team goes up by 17 or more points. So that could include you, Kevin, with the Illini. With the instant payout offer on straight bets and parlay selections, they're marked early as winners if your team goes up by 17, so 3 possessions or more. Download the app and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Remember to use that promo code that you heard from the get-go on the show, the lines, one word, to not only get that special exclusive November offer where you can get $5 or you bet $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets from the get-go, no matter how your bet turns out. But you can also get that early win if Illinois does jump out ahead. Unfortunately, Brett, no way to really apply that to totals in this game. But looking at the back half of the sandwich that I mentioned, the other half of Brett's Bet365 Sicko game or games of the week, Old Dominion 4-6, 2-point home favorite according to Bet365 against 7-3 Marshall. How are you betting this game, Brett?
Well, I already bet it when Old Dominion was +2 underdogs, and now they're 2.5-point favorites, but I'm still okay with that because you're moving through zero. You're not really losing a ton of percentage points between where it opened and where it sits right now. This is a terrible spot for Marshall. They're coming off the most emotional game that they play every year. They beat Coastal Carolina on that remembrance night of the team that was tragically killed in 1970, and now you're coming off of that to play at Old Dominion, which is a team that has nipped some teams, including my own Bowling Green Falcons, when they were coming off of those 2 tough losses to Texas A&M and Penn State of all teams. And they also beat Texas State earlier back too last week at home. They lost to James Madison, but only by 3. And I know that line was already all over that, but this is a team that plays a lot better at home than on the road. And on the other side, Marshall is a team that plays a lot better at home compared to on the road as well. 6 of their 7 wins this year came at home. They're 1-3 on the road. Their only road win, Southern Miss, probably a bottom 5 team in the FBS as my numbers have it. They're pretty terrible, but I think some people are a little bit nervous, especially where this line opened at, that, well, their starting quarterback, Grant Wilson's not playing. They're missing their All-American linebacker, Jason Henderson. Guys, they've been without Grant Wilson since week 2. He's played in 1 game since then. So the team you see now is the team you're going to get on Saturday as well. And I think that this is just a great spot. They're home. They started off as home dogs. They flipped. I still like the side there. And at 4-6, this is the kicker here at this time of year. I love finding these kind of spots. At 4-6, they are 1 loss away from being eliminated from the bowl season. And look, at Old Dominion, your success is measured by bowl appearances. We're not competing for championships in Norfolk, Virginia there. I've been there. It's actually a delightful stadium, but Marshall's already clinched. They have a 1-game lead on the Sun Belt East. I know Georgia Southern has the tiebreaker there, so Marshall needs to win, but they could take it down to the final year. They have some room to play with. Called out last week with Louisiana and those teams that have clinched their spot. They have some wiggle room atop of the conference, and they go out and they lose to an underdog. I think Old Dominion, obviously now the favorite. I like them going away with 2.5 points.
Yeah, I mean, just back to your point about pretty good situational spot for Old Dominion. Similar, not necessarily the same case with Colorado, Kansas, but situational spots tend to be profitable long-term when teams like Old Dominion, teams like Kansas outperform the market's expectations when maybe the market is still undervaluing a team like the Jayhawks by a touch. I'm not saying the market hasn't adjusted. This point spread would definitely be higher between the Jayhawks and the Buffs if Kansas didn't upset BYU last week. But similar deal. The market has adjusted on Old Dominion, but maybe there's still a little bit of wiggle room with the line being under the key number of 3 and so much to play for that side. Kevin, can we make it another game where we're going 3 for 3 on the once home dog, now favored Old Dominion?
I did get to watch Marshall this year when it lost 49-14 to Ohio State. Yes, they are 1-3 on the road, but their road losses, 31-14 at Virginia Tech, 49-14 at Ohio State, and then a 1-point loss at Georgia Southern. Something as I was kind of looking, this was not a game that I had on my radar until our pre-show meeting. Marshall's 8-1-1 in its last 10 against the spread, but obviously it is a dog now at this point, so it could still stay in the right number and lose this game. I don't have any real grand reason other than just kind of looking at the two teams from top down. I'm going to take Marshall. I think mostly just to get a little bit of disagreement between us and maybe not go for an 0-3 jinx on this one.
I like that. Yeah,
it is worth pointing out that Colorado and Marshall are combined 16-4 against the spread this year.
But generally speaking, that's when you want to fade a team,
yes,
when they're at the peak of their market ratings. So, Kevin, I hope, one of us will be right, to your point. So at least the show will get a correct pick on this game. But as we mentioned from the top here throughout the show, remember to sign up with Bet365. The link is in the description. You can choose between a couple different offers, whether it's the bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets, whether your first bet wins or loses at Bet365. Also, that early payout offer still stands, whether you're a returning customer or first-time user with this promo code, along with the opportunity, if you're a first-time user, first-time customer, to get that $1,000 first bet safety net offer, which means you bet up to $1,000, you lose the bet, you get $1,000, up to $1,000 in bonus bets. If the first bet loses, if it wins, you go along with your day like any other wager. So, Brett, any last words here on Beat the Closing Number this week?
No. If anybody's going to be at Rutgers, come find me. I'll be around.
All right, Kevin, are you going to look to follow in Brett's footsteps and travel out to Piscataway?
I will not. I will be in Columbus for the Ohio State Indiana game. I have been to Piscataway. There's always a nice little fair set up there, like right by the stadium. Face painting, rides, everything. Just what you want. So go ahead and get yourself, look like a lion or something like that.
Face paint. I like it. Support the under. You're kind of cheering against Rutgers, if you paint your face Illinois colors, navy blue, orange, or vice versa. So you could change it up midway through. I don't know how much time that'll take, but you can go for it, Brett.
It sounds great. I will paint my face afterwards like Rutgers should they win this game. Please don't hold me to that. Please do not hold me to that.
He is Brett Gibbons, and along with Kevin Noon, you can follow Kevin on X at Kevin_Noon, a Buckeye Huddle and Wager Wire. He'll be at Ohio State, Indiana. Great game we touched on off the top. And Brett, you can follow him on X at Road to CFB. Follow me at Eli Hershkovich. Check out our work at thelines.com. All of our bets in our Discord channel. The link is over at thelines.com. In the top right-hand corner, it is free. Thanks for watching and listening here to the College Football Edition of Beat the Closing Number, Week 13. So long, everybody, and good luck with your Week 13 picks.